Welcome to another installment of Duel, where I pit two games against each other that had similar development, releases, and/or themes to determine which of them pulled it off better. Last time I looked at Strafe and Dusk to decide which kicked off the retro shooter revival the best. Today I am looking at two more retro indie shooters, Apocryph and AMID. I've been talking a lot about old school shooters lately, but Doom Eternal has me in a mood. You can expect our Doom Eternal review soon. When people think of 90s shooters, most people think of id and games like Doom, Wolfenstein, and Quake, or the build engine with games like Duke Nukem 3D, Shadow Warrior, or Blood. Usually games with big guys and bigger guns taking on aliens, robots, demons, Lovecraftian monsters, or the occult. But there were also fantasy shooters back in the day too. Yeah, fantasy wasn't just a genre for RPGs. HERETIC was released in 1994, developed by Raven Software, and published by id. Raven Software would go on to make the 2009 Wolfenstein game as well as Quake 4, Jedi Outcast, Jedi Academy, and are now working as assistant developers for Call of Duty ever since Black Ops. HERETIC went on to spawn three sequels, HEXEN, which added RPG elements to the formula, HEXEN 2, and HERETIC 2, which saw the series shift to the third person. Most of the new retro shooters coming out are trying to replicate Quake or Doom or Duke Nukem, but two that have come out recently came out with the intention of bringing the shooters back to the fantasy genre, Apocryph and AMID. So which game did it better? Let's take a look at each. The first game is Apocryph. I can't actually find much information about the development of the game. According to Steam reviews, the game was crowdfunded. It was originally supposed to feature 30 levels to play through. It was made by a company called Big Sur Games and was originally released as early access through Steam Greenlight. The game was fully released in April of 2018, and other than that, I don't know much about the development of the game. The story is that you play as a character known as the Arbiter, a high-ranking religious figure who, for some reason that was unexplained, was exiled from his church and has recently returned to find your homeland overrun with monsters. It doesn't go much into the story beyond that. The game starts off outside of a church-looking building, and as you enter, you kill a huge horde of skeletons with your bare hands before getting to your first weapon. You get a variety of different weapons as you play that you can hold all at once and can select through a classic-style weapon wheel in the form of stabs, bracers, crossbows, and swords, each which use one of three mana types, blue, green, or purple. You can also hold and use items such as grenades or healing items. On first look, the game does look pretty decent. Graphics are kind of weird, but unique in an art style way. It definitely looks like a Unity indie game. Enemy designs are a tad on the generic, but at least there's a variety to them and the game feels fast and old school. But as you play through, the flaws really start to shine through. Now, I played the game on the hardest difficulty, so maybe it's better on lower difficulties, but I read some reviews and it doesn't really seem like it. As you play, you start to realize early on that the game really doesn't give you enough ammo or health pickups to get through. I found myself struggling to maintain my ammo counts to complete a level, and the reason is that the game just throws a fuck ton of enemies at you at once, constantly. They just spawn a dozen in at a time. Most of the enemies are brain dead and just follow you around and let you kite them and shoot them afar, easily dodgeable. But there are so many enemies on the screen, it's really hard to tell what's going on, and it's impossible to keep your ammo for the next section. Like I said, the AI is brain dead. They straight up will just stop attacking you if you get too far away from their line of sight, and the geometry of the level is poorly designed too. The main strategy for the game is to simply kite all the enemies and take them all out, but the ground is so jagged that you'll constantly get stuck on bullshit trying to dodge, and it makes it really hard to dodge. Likewise, the enemies will also get stuck on the geometry. The music also kind of sucks and has random breaks and loops that just don't make sense. They tried going for a dynamic music system that ramps up when combat occurs, but it just didn't work right. A couple of tracks are actually pretty decent, I will admit, with some cool folksy or folk metal vibes, but the majority is just bad generic metal riffs. It's just, they don't fit in with the style of the game at all, and it's really sudden and jarring. On top of that, the variety of enemies I mentioned earlier, yeah, those same enemies keep coming back the whole game, and it ruins that feeling of variety that you feel from the first couple levels. What the whole thing comes down to is Apocryph simply wasn't finished. The first 3 or so levels start out okay. It's rough around the edges, but fine. You can tell that it was an indie game, but you know, if you were buying it on sale, it wouldn't have been a big deal. But after you can tell the devs really just said, fuck it, and threw every enemy that they could at you to pad out the time. It's really obvious when you come to the crypt level, the level just goes on and on forever, and you are constantly running low on ammo. The level literally has over 1,000 enemies being thrown at you at once. Like, look at this. Now, in a well-designed game, fighting 1,000 enemies at once could be badass. If this was Doom Eternal or, Kingdom Hearts 2 had a 1,000 enemy fight, and it was really fun and cool. But Apocryph isn't well-designed like that, and you'll be fighting 1,000 brain-dead, overpowered enemies with no ammo and no place to run, after fighting hordes of other enemies throughout the entire level and a boss before that part. So it's best to just run past them all. The 30 promised levels are also nowhere to be found. There's like 6 or 7, and I don't even think these 6 or 7 are meant to be beaten. The main boss is the Guardian Titan, and the last campaign achievement is actually for beating that Guardian Titan. He's a pain in the ass, but he's mostly just a bullet sponge. I beat him and then did one level after and couldn't advance any further. The game just got too cheap. Even with the best weapon in the game, there are too many enemies attacking you to kill them all, and the ammo they give you is too little. It's whack. So I did the last level with a cheat code. Coincidentally, the cheat was the same for Heretic, mainly just to get the last achievement I needed, which is actually to use a cheat code, and then decided to stop playing. It's actually rather unfortunate because the game started with promise. I was enjoying the first couple levels, but the devs just stopped giving a shit. That said, there are some good things about it. Like I said, the speed and movement are decent. If the level geometry was better, it would actually feel fluid enough. The weapons are all pretty unique and are fun to use for the most part, and you can find upgrades to all these weapons to provide a secondary fire. I actually like the Ice Sword, which froze enemies in their place, and it made me feel like Arthas from Warcraft wielding Frostmourne, especially since the main character looks like Undead Arthas too. The Blood Mode mechanic was also pretty useful. It gives you a way to regenerate health and deal some extra damage in a pinch. As far as setup, there really aren't many options in the way of graphic. There's supposed to be a retro pixel mode, but it doesn't work and just makes your screen look black. And there's some like simple, control settings and things like that. That brings us to game number 2, AMID Evil. AMID Evil was developed by Indefatigable, a team of 2 friends, Leon Zawada and Simon Rance, who got into game development by making mods for Doom and later Rise of the Triad. They eventually worked on the 2013 Rise of the Triad reboot as well. AMID actually started development as a Doom mod in 1997, but was never finished. AMID was announced in 2017 and entered Steam in early 2018 with its final and full release date of June of 2019. The game is published by New Blood Interactive, the same company that published Dusk. AMID is to Heretic what Dusk is to Blood. It proudly wears its influence on its sleeves, but it's such a damn good game that it really becomes its own. The first thing you'll notice is how beautiful the game is. The game utilizes a technique called normal mapped sprites, which is basically 3D polygons made up of a bunch of individual smaller sprites. It really creates a unique look for the game, and I rather enjoy it. Like Apocryph, you start the game off with a melee weapon, and AMID it's an axe, before getting your first real weapon, a staff. Throughout the game, you get a plethora of unique and cool looking weapons, each you hold at the same time, and you find ammo throughout your adventure. These weapons all act as traditional FPS weapons. You start with the Staff of the Azure Orb, which is essentially a slow shooting ranged weapon. Then you get the Whisper's Edge, which is a green sword, which is kind of like the game's shotgun. Shoots a wide arc that is less accurate than the staff, but better for crowd control. Then you get the Voltride, which is an electrified trident that shoots really fast. You get the Celestial Claw, which is this game's rocket launcher, Star of Torment, a mace that's kind of like this game's super shotgun, and lastly the Aeternum, which is the BFG of AMID. All these weapons are cool as hell and fun to use. The Celestial Claw is actually my favorite and the coolest rocket launcher that I've ever used in any game ever. Weapon is a staff that draws in planets from space, shrinks them down, and shoots them out. You are literally shooting enemies with fucking exploding planets. It's awesome. All these weapons can be powered up on your soul mode as well, which provide increased damage and fire rate, and all weapons are tied to one of 5 mana types: blue, green, yellow, purple, and pink. Like with Dusk, movement in AMID is amazing. It's fast and fluid, and you can easily and gracefully move your way through levels, increasing speed with bunny hops, and can even planet jump with the Celestial Claw. It's honestly just as much fun moving in this game as it is fighting enemies. AMID really outdid itself with the enemy variety as well. There are 7 chapters, each containing 10 levels, and they all have an end boss. And all of these chapters feature unique enemy types. They all need different strategies to dispose of, and it really helps keep the game fresh and interesting. Level variety matches that as well, as you explore various different biomes and environments unique to each chapter. Levels are fun to play, they're well designed, they have secrets to find as well, and each chapter is accessible and separated through a hub world akin to how it works in Quake. Oh, and the music is awesome as well. It's atmospheric at times, but also gets energetic when action is going on, and it was composed by none other than Andrew fucking Hulshalt. Hell yeah. AMID makes you feel like a badass knight on an adventure as you use magical weapons to fight creative monsters. In a lot of ways, I actually like AMID more than Dusk, if you can believe it. It's a solid experience that is well made and tight. The only real complaints I have with it is that with 7 chapters, it does feel a little bit long at times, but I really don't want to complain about a game giving me more to play. Alright, so we've gone through a little bit of Apocryph, we've gone through a little bit of AMID. Both of these games were created with the intent of resurrecting the 90s fantasy vibe of Heretic and Hexen. Did one do a better job replicating that? Do I recommend one or the other? Well, given my brief review, I think it's apparent that I much preferred AMID to Apocryph. From its fluid movement to its combat, AMID truly feels like a fantasy FPS made in the 90s. In every way, it feels like a modern spiritual successor to Hexen, but with a fresh coat of paint, and I highly recommend it. Apocryph starts off surprisingly well. It has a lot going for it with its fast movement, surprisingly fluid combat, and fun and unique weapon variety. It just isn't polished enough. Last, level design was straight up bad in some areas, and there was not nearly enough ammo to get you through the levels, and you can tell the devs just stopped caring and filled the game with a ton of enemies to pad it out. In the end, I don't think it captured the essence of Hexen. That said, I do think it captured the essence of some early 2000s shooters, and I'm talking about Painkiller. I actually do rather like Painkiller, but Painkiller is the kind of game that just focuses on throwing a bunch of enemies at you to kite around small enemies. With a little more polish and maybe some more ammo thrown in, Apocryph would have actually made a good Painkiller game. even if it didn't work as a Hexen successor. And because of that, if you do like Painkiller, I surprisingly recommend getting Apocryph if it's on sale for like $1 or $2. I wouldn't pay more than a couple dollars, but it can provide you a couple hours of entertainment if you've played through all of Painkiller and all of Serious Sam and just want something to do. With all that said, the winner of the duel is undeniably AMID Evil. It's an overall better experience and better captures the essence of Hexen and is a better successor to that name. I hope you liked the video. If you did, do me a favor and like it, leave a comment with what game you like better, and subscribe to the channel for more content in the future. I'm going to be continuing this Duel series. I am deciding which 2 games to do next. Maybe leave a comment with some suggestions as well. The Doom Eternal is coming soon. I finished my half of the review a while ago. I am waiting for Dennis to finish his. That said, I hope you stick around. Hopefully that Doom Eternal review will come up in the next couple of days. And if not, I'll have something else ready for you.